Hello, Voices of Wrestling listener. Dave Ryan here. Have you ever wondered to yourself how many hidden gems are hidden away inside the last years of World Championship Wrestling? Have you ever asked yourself how many tenuous gags can be made about the name Mike Enos? And have you ever thought about what it sounds like for two Irishmen to interpret a very chaotic company through its B show? The answers to all this and more are just a click away. Check out Days of Thunder every second Thursday on the Voices of Wrestling podcast network.
Hey everybody, my name is Jesse Collins and I am the host of the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast, a show right here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. On the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast, we take a deep look at individual issues and stories that are going on in the wrestling world. Each episode is about a different topic and we take a thorough and educated look at things ranging from current booking trends to breakdowns on individual performers and angles to investigations into different fan cultures across the industry. In addition, we keep a close eye on the wrestling media, and as a professional journalist, I bring a unique perspective to how current issues in wrestling are being covered and discussed through the wrestling media. We have a revolving series of guests from across wrestling punditry joining us on each episode, and we hope that you make the choice to give us a listen on wherever you get your podcast from.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
Welcome back to the Euro Clutch. I'm Ian Hamilton, and this episode I want to go through a lot of what happened in 2025, but first, we're one weekend deep into the new year, and I want to make a bit of a mention about the Rev Pro Road to Wembley. Of course, Rev Pro had their first show of the year this past weekend, live in London 103 at Porchester Hall. Largely solid show, but a few self-inflicted wounds, you'd say, in the main event, or certainly the second half of the card. And granted, we were, 7 months away from the show at Wembley, but I'm a little concerned about the direction of the road they're taking to get there. So, top two matches on the Live in London 103 card. We had a British Cruiserweight title match, Joe Lando defending his title against Danny Black. This was a CPF Collide kind of match, and it was a storyline that, there'd been some mumblings, like, we want to rewind a little bit. So in 2024, the first inaugural Trios Grand Prix, CPF won and they got their 3 trophies to get whatever matches they wanted. Danny Black cashed his in to get another shot at the Young Guns early last year. Maverick Mayhew cashed his in to get a match with Callum Newman in Stevenage last year. And Joe Lando used his to get a shot at Neil O'Brien's Cruiserweight title, which he won at the end of 2025. And the whole thing there, even though, Maverick Mayhew used his trophy and, got a match for himself, Danny Black took umbrage at the fact that Joe Lando used the trophy on him. That caused some consternation between the two. It was a story which, if you wrote it down, made sense, but just how quickly it went from being, they were fine. I mean, literally, you had the December Live in London show play out with Joe Lando getting the title. And it was like post-match promos, internet interviews, because we were a week between the Live London show and the Uprising show in Cardiff, where they had the scramble with Joe Lando defending against others, including Danny Black. It just felt completely rushed, and meant to go to the first show of the year, Danny Black getting the title shot. It just felt completely rushed, where you had CPF, fighting amongst themselves, teasing, full break from Ben. We have a match, we're friends again. And, the storyline itself was fine, if not extremely rushed. But the match itself just did not land. Like, I was watching the stream live on Rev Pro On Demand, and bear in mind with CPF are a group where you have a lot of, let's say, extremely vocal fans. I'm sure you've heard Rev Pro shows. You'll hear the fans shriek for pretty much anything they do. It was largely a quiet match, and it was one of those where it just felt to me that, they like CPF against others, but not against each other. And it almost made me go back to the days a reference for long-time fans, of Two Unlimited. Like, Rev Pro back in the day, had those two Irish lads. Not everything landed, and was kind of a way here. But I say as a match, Lando against Danny Black just didn't work. There's just too many bits where, they're trying stuff which just looks stupid. Like, there's one bit where things that Daniel Black was, getting to his feet and then just fell to his back so he could, take a shooting star elbow drop, which, again, is fine, but it's one of those universe-breaking things. And, and I say the match just didn't work for me. It was a match that just felt like, okay, we're done with it, and I think, wording can be taken multiple ways, but when you hear Rev Pro afterwards go, we hope that's the last time CPF fight each other, that's something that could be taken both ways. I'm going to take it the way of, I just don't want to see these two against each other again. Stick with tags. That seems to be their forte. Obviously, Joe Lando's cruiserweight champ. He's going to be the singles for a bit, but to me, they just don't seem to be ready or fitting in singles as they're trying to be presented at the moment. Elsewhere, main event on Matt Live in London 103, you had Jay Joshua's second title defence. Now, Jay Joshua won the belt from Charles Samuels at Uprising. We had an instant rematch, 2 weeks later, at the Seasons Beatings live in Southampton show, which, on paper, that was another one just didn't add up for me. Like, after the Uprising show, you had Charles Samuels doing promos, backstage of almost acting like he was done. Like, it's Jay Joshua's time now. Then you quickly pivot to, you're having a title match. You're pivoting to, you're having, an instant rematch. And this is one where, it was solid, but again, it's one of those where, on a run-of-the-mill rank-and-file show, you're not expecting the world title to change 2 weeks later. I mean, not unless, folks have really lost their head or something major's gone on, someone signed a contract somewhere. But, the first defence was solid. It, kind of cemented Jay Joshua as, the guy, he's beaten the former champion twice in a row. And then the post-match, you had the setup for the match we had at London last weekend against Michael Oku, which, on one side it's like, well, are you, rushing to cement him as a challenger, or are you also running out of credible challengers? Because one of the main issues we had coming out of Uprising was, great, Jay Joshua's the champion, but who's next? We had Michael Oku, who seems perennially around the title picture, and that is something that you can maybe point fingers at, like Rev Pro in 2026 badly need to have people in a spot where they are ready and able to challenge for belts at a moment's notice, rather than have what we've had last year, the short notice sudden title tournaments or contenders tournaments. But yeah, this one we had Oku and Jay Joshua, and this is one where this was Rev Pro doing WWF, and historically they are known to do that. There's the famous one in York Hall a couple of years back where Andy Quilton doing the boxing pose against He Who Shall Not Be Named. But Rev Pro are prone to doing these WWF sports entertainment-y things, and it fell in here. The match was solid, but the finish just completely overrode everything that happened before that. So towards the end of the match, you had Oku with Jay Joshua and half crab, beat on the verge of submitting. Then all of a sudden, Oku's music and video plays. No bell, but then you have the ring announcer, Francesca, announce, here's your winner, and then the contender gives a belt. Commentary was acting like everyone's like, hang on a second, there's no bell. Rev Pro Universe, they have the bell, whether it's the MP3 or the physical bell, and just everyone falling for, someone's music played. And then, of course, commentary or video picture cuts to a guy in a Templario mask. It's Connor Mills underneath a hood. And it was just, the most convoluted distraction thing, which, like in Rev Pro, they don't do a good job of protecting their referees, like whether it's Oscar Harding or Chris Hatch. or Ref Harv back when he was around, they would almost always make referees the fall guys, to the point where if something was done to make referees look stupid, the refs would be made to look the fool. Like Chris Hatchling more than ever seems to be the fall guy for these. But this time you had Ref Oscar actually making a point of saying, I didn't ring the bell. What the hell's going on? Why is everybody being stupid? Am I losing my mind? Is everybody gone crazy? It's just me. But it just made everyone around the product just look absolutely stupid when you could see the referee not protesting to what was going on. Yet everyone's just going around, well, the music's playing, so it must be fine. Oh, well, the contender's handing the belt over, it's been announced. Like, you just made everyone look so stupid for the sake of a finish, which took the wind out of the live crowd, and of course, match was restarted, carried on. Jay Joshua getting the win moments later, but it just felt to me as like, why are you confusing your audience for the sake of an angle like this? It really took down the crowd live. On the streams, people watching was like, what the hell? This is absolutely stupid. And it's like, the other thing is, it's also cementing you're keeping Michael Oku and Connor Mills as a direction. Now, if Wembley was in 2-3 months' time, great. Except it's in 7 months. Now, I would have thought that Oku and Mills would have been one of the big matches for Wembley because, yeah, you've just done it at Uprising, but it's not a match that Rev Pro's done to death. But at the same time, you're also doing, the feud, last month, you're carrying it on. It's like, do you really trust Rev Pro to keep this going and fresh for the next 7 months? Granted, there are storylines across Rev Pro, and we'll touch on them later, where, people come and go, but Oku and Mills are pretty much in every major show. I mean, Michael Oku, you can never get him off these shows, it feels like. But it's just one of those where you need to keep your powder dry for stuff like this, and the fact that you're still going in deep on Oku and Mills, only the 9th of January as I'm recording this, it just feels like they've got the plans, but if this is the Wembley match, you've set off way too soon. You're going to be sat outside Wembley Way, down as at Empire Way, for weeks and months, and as we've seen before, in wrestling, the magic with storylines and feuds or rivals or whatever synonym you want to use is you peak your story at the right time. And to me, it feels like this one, if this is a Wembley thing, and I don't know why the hell it isn't unless someone's getting signed, they've just pulled the trigger on this way too soon. But I'm always one for being proven wrong, and we'll see if they put a pin in this and try and revive this going into the summer. But yeah. And just for me, it just feels like, this is the Rev Pro Road to Wembley. Right now, it feels like a very bumpy dirt track. And it's not that I want to have, a full card 7 months out. I'm not, don't be ridiculous. But just doesn't feel like that they have anything even being teased. And part of the problem, I feel like, is the schedule they're running. There was a graphic posted earlier this week by Rev Pro with their complete schedules. Of course, we already knew that, they've got live in London, live in Coventry, live in Southampton, live in Sheffield show, so we've got the season tickets for all those. But they're running 27 shows before Wembley. These aren't the trainee shows, but you're looking like, regular trips to, obviously monthly trips to Portchester Hall in London. They're in Sheffield every other month. They're in Coventry a few times. Southampton every other month. They've announced dates in Wolverhampton. They've announced dates in Cardiff, the Vale Arena again, which, I sincerely hope there's an AEW tour to be announced, because that to me feels unwise, doing 2 shows in Cardiff with nothing to, have wrestling fans in town already. They're doing Doncaster again, which to me I felt was a bit of a surprise given how, or at least initially, lackluster the sales were. I mean, obviously the walk-ups of the late sales did well. But everyone pointing to that first show of Mercedes Monday, barely doing half full, is maybe sign that, okay, extenuating circumstances with Easter and WrestleMania weekend. But that to me points that, if it is a time that Rev Pro want to do, they need to run a lot more and, maybe, pardon the phrase, need to eat shit for a while to build that crowd up. Rev Pro, they have also got Sheffield, Stevenage dates. So I think that's 41 shows, not including trainee shows, on the books for 2026. No mention yet for stuff, outside of the UK. They have done the double impact shows with GWF in Berlin, although last year's shows were a bit collar tuggy when it came to crowds I can make out. The shows in Barcelona, although again, we're hearing now what news matters 4 months from the Trios Grand Prix, that second Trios Grand Prix show, still not available. Again, I don't know whether something's happened with the guys in Barcelona, maybe the iPhones all collapsed, but when you've got something that's such a big storyline device as those Trios Grand Prix trophies, it feels a bit weird that the show just came out just to show a title defense to then do like another match off the back of that, but the actual Trios Grand Prix to me just doesn't seem to be having a natural landing spot, at least in 2026. And the fact that 2025's is very much lost to the ether as we sit here, perhaps underscores that again. So in terms of tentpole shows, obviously we have the live and wherevers, which don't get the fancy names. Put these dates in your calendar: March 21st in Wolverhampton, April 12th in Cardiff, May 17th in Doncaster, then the following week, May 24th in TBC. I'll go back to that one in a second because there was a rumour about a certain venue for that one. June 27th in Stevenage, July 25th in Wolverhampton, August 16th in Cardiff. That's 2 weeks before Wembley, which, again, it just feels a bit... I don't know, like, you can have a lot of fans travelling to Wembley for AEW weekend. Like, that is going to be a show in Cardiff where you're going to be really pulling from the fans in and around South Wales, because you're really going to be getting fans travelling to Cardiff and then doing Wembley, especially the elevated ticket prices, especially the big AEW show later on. I mean, right now those AEW tickets aren't even on sale. So this is a bit of a weird one for me. Like, it's a tentpole show for the sake of one, but we'll see. September 12th in Stevenage, beg your pardon. October 17th in Wolverhampton, and then last one of the year, December 13th in Cardiff. Now, the other thing I would say is not all these are going to be like tentpole, Revolution Rumble, high stakes, surprising. Like, especially for Stevenage ones, there'll be probably British Jake up there, and one of those will very much likely be a Fantastica Mania UK, you'd expect. That May 24th show is a bit of a head scratcher though. Because there was speculation that Nottingham was going to be getting a show. Finally, Kanji, wrestling in Nottingham, and finally be properly introduced as Nottingham's own in Nottingham on a Rev Pro show. Who'd have thunk it? But apparently has gone a bit cool. But the one venue that you will see jumps out or conspicuous by its absence on this, know your call on the schedule. Now, in the past, I think Andy Quilden on some of his interviews last summer before the anniversary show did make a point of saying that your call ain't particularly great to run these days, at least in terms of returns. Now, I think it was comment was something along the lines of, Rev Pro will be at best breaking even running your call, which, is sad because your call was the venue for Rev Pro for years. Like, Rev Pro managed to get your call to run wrestling effectively in this current era. A lot of big moments in your call, and the fact that now that it was the last your call show, as he says, doing a cage match on air. That last your call show you're looking at would have been when was it? Would have been the June of 2025 Revolution Rumble, and yeah, as it stands, you're looking a bit, unless that May 24th show is your call, you're potentially looking at least 18 months about a visit there, which is a bit of a crying shame, especially when you think, was it the Lucha Libre World, they've run back-to-back sellouts, and expect to maybe make money with a lot of imports, the El Santo quote-unquote retirement shows. Nobody ever retires, of course. But yes, certainly, if Rev Pro have reduced your call to once a year because they can't make it pay yet, Lucha Libre World with all those fly-ins can't. It's not for me to speculate, if anything's going on, but it just seems very weird that Rev Pro's expansion outside of London and the South seems to be coming at the cost, intentionally otherwise, of perhaps their biggest venue from their first 15 years. Now, if this was like a Flagship Plus, it would be like a 3-minute song interlude here, but I'm not all about that. What I am going to do, though, is touch across a load of European wrestling promotions, what happened to them in 2025, main touch points, pluses and minuses. And since we just spoke about Rev Pro, we may as well keep that theme going. Of course, Rev Pro, you would have to say, for all of their weaknesses this past year, they are still the premier destination for the workweight graps in the UK and Europe. And I guess still technically the unofficial outpost for New Japan and AEW, even though we haven't had a Royal Quest for a while. Now, of course, Rev Pro, with their connections, you can say that the ability to book world-class talent, you'd say, still unmatched. Certainly, Mercedes money for all of the pros and cons, which have been covered to death at this point. Certainly got a lot of fresh eyeballs in Rev Pro, even if that didn't fully translate at the box office. Ricochet, being brought in at Uprising for the AEW national title defense there. That, was booking you would not have expected, at least not with Ricochet, being an AEW, because he has been with Rev Pro before. But I guess the biggest criticism kind of ties into Mercedes money stuff is the fact that they had their women's title on someone who wasn't in the company, meant that while you had women's division fighting to be the challenger, because Monet's appearances weren't quite, let's say, scheduled, it meant that you were having uneven builds, shall we say. You getting people getting wins, but because the next show she was on wasn't there, it was very hard to keep the momentum going. And then you had the false starts, Danny Luna winning that the endless gauntlet match at high stakes, and then that turned into nothing. And even right now, we had some of the number one contenders tournament that Sapphire Reed won to get the match with Monet. And then, as we saw back end last year, slowly starting to build, Kanji up as the next contender, and starting to put not too obvious hints about, she's no good in multi-way matches. And you think, okay, great, well, that means you're going to have Mercedes Monet, Kanji, and two others in a four-way, and that's where she loses the belt, right? No. And I think that's something which we've kind of, we've kind of had an issue with. Obviously we had an Uprising back end of, not even a month ago as we record, where Monet retained against Rio. And then days later, Monet dropping the belt to Alex Windsor. And that, to me, kind of underscores the issue with working with other promotions. And if you just book in a promotion's talent for a one-off match, yeah, you know what you're getting. It's a chance to put a spotlight on your guy, but ultimately your guy is probably going to lose. When your belt is in the hands of another promotion, whether it's officially or informally, you end up with stuff like this where, you can build whatever the heck you want. You can tease Danny Luna, being the challenger. Oh, well, she's contracted TNA. That's politically awkward. Or you can, do a long build for Rio or Kanji. But if, the Masters, AEW in this case, want to pull the trigger on, the downfall of Ultimo Monet, unfortunately you can end up with, AEW, doing stuff which kind of doesn't jive with what you are showing in your promotion. So yeah, I remember, when the results from the Manchester Collision taping came out that, Alex Windsor won the belt on what was essentially the second half of a Collision show that was split over 2 days out of time. So it's like, yeah, the fact that it's on Collision's not the A show, but it's a, an out of time sort of Collision that wasn't going to get much in the way of eyeballs. And at least on TV, at least wasn't a house show, but it's like, how this could have played out. We're never going to get Mercedes Monet losing to Kanji one-on-one in a Rev Pro show. But the fact that it was buried away on an AEW show, that, okay, you can say AEW's exposure, but at this point, the belt's still with AEW, and the scalp of beating Alex Windsor for the belt isn't going to be anywhere near as big as the scalp of beating Monet for the belt. So, yeah, it just feels a bit disappointing how that played out. Given how static the women's division has had to be around the title pitch. Granted, you've had a lot of faces come through, but with no belt to fight for, and even know when you can be able to fight for the belt, it has been a lot of wheel spinning. Frankly, the men's division, Jay Joshua rising to the top of the end of the year, has been a breath of fresh air. I remember it wasn't that long ago he was a fresh face in Rev Pro. But the fact that you've had whatever's coming through with with Charles Samuelson, we've teased a fake retirement, But ultimately, the issue you have with the titles, we touched on this in the last episode, is you just seem to be having, quote-unquote, challenge of the month. And one of the things I would like to see Rev Pro do in 2026 is the SmackDown 6 stuff I spoke about in the past. Have, 4, 5, 6 names in each division that you are going to push, and not have, these for 6 would win and everybody else lose, but have them kept relatively strong so that if you do have a big show come out in no end, we've just spoken, they have got a fairly locked down calendar for this year. You're not going to be surprised by, oh crap, we've got big name coming in. We need to do a mini tournament of next 3 shows. Hurry. But yeah, it's the kind of thing where just things are working, but also don't feel like they're certainly not coming across like they're planned out, which is always a bit of a negative. Elsewhere, of course, had the Young Guns. They were the main tag team champions this year. They won the belts back in March from Conor Mills and Jay Joshua. Feud with CPF throughout the summer. Retained against the Grizzled Young Veterans at the 13th anniversary. But then it kind of petered out. What the heck's gone to the Trios Grand Prix, beating Matt Tross again. It just seemed to be, Young Guns champions without a major threat. And as I say this, yes, they did lose to Lycos Jim on that first Live of London show, which is yielded a title shot this weekend in Sheffield. But let's be frank, Lycos Jim, if they win, it'll be a, what the hell, lads, you've, a team that's barely used in Rev Pro, but maybe that's a fresh start and you have, Young Guns chase. But to me, it feels like Rev Pro's tag division may be the weakest just because you don't have the dearth of it, so the number of established teams that you would have had before, or certainly credible established teams. Cruiserweight division, of course, Joe Lando, end of the year's champion, had Nino Bryant there for a bit. But that's one way you could really make the Cruiserweight division like your tentpole, or certainly marquee division. As much as I'm not a fan of CPF as singles, have, Joe Lando on top, Danny Black in as a, underneath chanting, Leon Cage, Nino Bryant, Kuro's been brought in, Robbie X, perennial lightbulb inspector as he is. Leighton Buzzard is being positioned for that division. So, there's your 6 names there. Add a few more to, I'll say make up the numbers, but a few more to, keep things varied. There's your Cruiserweight division sort. Now you just need the heavyweights and, should be laughing. But yeah, Rev Pro, they seem to have a lot of their shows locked down, so where you can be getting stuff. My only concern is, do they have the content to put on more shows that is going to make people want to go and watch, whether it's at the gate or on the laptop on their TVs? Because right now, a lot of the shows they're doing just seem to be stop-offs and not must-see TV. And it's something I had a bit of a gripe about, wrestling content. If you're doing wrestling shows every week, great. It's great for wrestlers when they're getting a regular paycheck, if they're certainly on the roster and being booked regularly. But as a fan, if you're watching a load of weekly shows and there isn't that much to sink your teeth into, it's wrestling for the sake of wrestling, and that's, unfortunately, is one of the worst things you can do in wrestling, is just have content for the sake of it. Staying in the UK, we're going to have a quick touch upon Progress Wrestling, and a promotion that I would say is largely stabilised this year. They're still doing the shows, but they are a far cry from what they were. And again, looking back at the past, looking back at what people were, is always going to be the thief of all joy, that kind of comparison. But Progress, they're not touring as much these days. They're doing the WrestleMania show. They do some show in Manchester, the Ballers Arena, for the love of wrestling conventions. They may do 1 or 2 shows outside of London, but for this point, they are largely a London-centric promotion, for better or for worse. This past year, a man like Dries was the guy who rose to the top, winning Super Strong Style. He beat Luke Jacobs in TLC match to claim the title. End of the year, we had a couple of returns. Cara Noir, he's now back as a bad guy. Spike Gervais now back as a good guy, which I suppose works, or at least in terms of it's different. But yeah, I kind of need a lot of convincing on Spike Gervais as a good guy. Cara Noir as a heel. That hairdo, that style just makes me look like he's an angry yuppie, which, I've never been sold on Cara Noir in the first place, and, Cara Noir is the bad guy, just isn't going to do it for me. Like, he's not a guy who's very big on promos, and unfortunately, Brit Ray's in 2026. is very much a promotion where you need to have, a scene where you need to have at least some promo built. So obviously you need to have your yeet, your thing where people can hang their hats on it. Cara Noir being the silent guy with a scowl, to me, just doesn't cut it. Elsewhere, of course, we had the Atlas titles being Progress's big, hey, this is a big thing we have and nobody else has. Bounced around a bit, Axel Tischer had the belt for a long while, then went to Mike DeVecchio before he got signed, went to Gene Money, then to Will Cruz, and then start of the year, Will Cruz dropping the belt to Saxon Huxley on Noah's New Year show, which, okay, great, but Saxon Huxley, I think, has only had one Progress booking in the past, so it'll be interesting to see where we go with there, because again, it's not like this Progress roster is stacked with big guys, and the fact that Huxley's first defence seems to be against Axel Tischer, what's old is new again, hey. And one other thing I do want to call out for Rev Pro in 2026, or going into this year, is Super Strong Style 16. So they've kind of fallen into the trap that WWE has in terms of, hey, we've got this thing, but it's primarily for men or for male wrestlers. And, we're putting a lot of focus on our women's roster. Well, we don't have this tentpole thing. So what they announced last year was they were going to do a women's Super Strong Style tournament. Now, at the time, people were suspecting, well, is this going to be a full-on 16-person tournament? When is it going to be held? Like, is it going to be its own thing? Like, what's the layout going to be? Because, Super Strong Style weekend now for Progress has become a 2-day event. It's a far cry from the 3 days at Alexandra Palace. It's back to the original 2 days for Ballroom because, that's the way Progress are at the moment in terms of popularity. And what they've done is they've decided to run the two tournaments in parallel. Now, what that means is you're not going to get two 16-person tournaments back-to-back. Don't be stupid, You're not going to be at the Electric Ballroom for 2 full days. What they are doing, though, is the first rounds are going to be held across promotions outside of Progress for the most part. I believe WXW in Ruth, and tonight they've got Bobby Guns. Also this weekend they've got Bobby Guns and Leah Bloom in the first round match. Next weekend it's Peter Tahani and Zoltan. Squash a job in Italy, they're doing Irene and Kanji in the first round. So we're getting promotions in, some of these with ties on the Progress On Demand service. But what this means for is you're getting, it's not Super Strong Style 16 as one tournament, it's 2 Super Strong Style 8s effectively in that weekend, which, it's fine for what it is, but it's also taken a massive step away from what Super Strong Style 16 initially was, of the sake of doing a WWE and having, a men and women's rumble on the same show. Now, is that Progress saying that they don't have confidence in being able to sell out, the Ballroom for, 2 weekenders? Maybe we couldn't get the dates and this is where they make good, but you'd have thought you've had this stuff locked down before you, do the announcement and all that. So we'll see how it goes. Obviously, 2 tournaments back on the same weekend. It's going to be a lot of tournament wrestling, and yeah, it's going to be the kind of thing where, it's not going to be a hard sell as such, because they're going to have a lot of names in the tournament, or in these first round matches where you think they're going to have no shot at being there. The 2 WXW ones, I think it's going to be interesting because, Bobby Guns is the only guy who's had much of a past, again, that's with, a Progress fan base with lodges in there. Peter Tahani, did have, was that 1 or 2 matches in the National Progression Series as we were coming out of COVID. But Leah Bloom and Zoltan are completely alien, or completely unfamiliar, I should say, to the modern Progress crowd. So we'll see where that goes. And obviously, Kanji you have as the absolute favourite of that tournament, especially since Progress are heavily leaning in towards Alexis Falcon going for women's title, which you'd suspect would be completely outside of this format. May as well stay in England. Pro Wrestling Eve, and he's another promotion that's kind of thrown their regular tournament format on its head. So this past year, Eve, they've leaned in a lot into their ties with AEW, thanks to producer Billy. And, having been to one of their shows live, it's a pretty good atmosphere. Problem is, this almost, I wouldn't say reliance, but the fact they're getting a lot more AEW names in means that you're running the risk of having people only turning up for those AEW names. We had Nyla Rose as champion, Chris Statlander, as well, Willow Nightingale. So you've got names there who people do want to come and see. The problem is, if they're on most every show, you're going to have the peaks and valleys in terms of ticket sales to some degree. It's not going to be like one show's going to be sold out and the other one is an empty room, but you are going to see those differences where the stars are and where the stars aren't. Again, the problem with that is just the pacing in general of how and when the quote-unquote stars come in. Like, heck, right now, tonight as I'm recording this, Eve are doing their She Won tournament. Now, originally, for those with memory going back to the Resistance Gallery in Bethnal Green, She Won was 4 shows in 2 days round robin. And not a single one of those tournaments they were able to complete without somebody getting injured. So you change the format. It's now a run-of-the-mill single elimination tournament. Except this year they've decided to split it over 2 shows, and I know there were some folks a little bit disgruntled at how that format changed. Like, originally was going to be, the January show was going to be quarter, semis and finals. Eve decided to change that, so the show in January are getting the quarterfinals and the semis, and I think there's also a playing match as well, because why the heck not? But it means for people who've gone off away to fly and get a hotel, go to a show they normally wouldn't have gone to for the She Won, you're going to have to do it all over again next month for the finals if you want to see them. Oh, and by the way, in March, they're also at the Indigo at the O2 for Wrestle Queendom, that big show, which, from what I've seen, ticket sales is doing absolute gangbusters with like 600 tickets sold. You're now literally standing room only at that point, so that is going to be a very star-laden show, a lot of buzz. Names like Harley Cameron from AEW's involved. So yeah, you can be getting a lot more matches. I think that's when there'll be starting to pay a bit more attention, where you're going to be getting actual matches on these shows, rather than hey, here's a graphic of name who's going to be on the Wrestle Queendom show. So well worth keeping an eye on. And I guess if you're the kind who likes dipping in and just seeing names in a different environment, Eve on Demand on YouTube, all the shows are live, and you've got the big back catalogue as well. Worth keeping an eye on, but certainly back into 2025 there were some grumbles starting to come up with booking, particularly with how maybe not predictable some of the storylines have gotten, but just how maybe one-note stuff we're getting. And the one thing I did pick up on the show I was at in November was just how Eve has attracted a crowd which reacts to anything. Like, you'll get wrestlers come out, they'll get applauded regardless of whether they're a good guy or a bad guy. They'll react accordingly during the match, and that's the kind of thing which it's good for an atmosphere, but in terms of the nuts and bolts of wrestling, can be very awkward if you've just got a crowd trained to react to bog standard cues rather than watching a product, digesting it and reacting as you organically would. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, Eve certainly in the first few months of this year, with all the big shows they've got, well worth keeping an eye on. And you'd expect as well they'd be doing a quote unquote big show around AEW weekend, where they can get a venue and certainly something to stand out from the big Wembley show Rev Pro's doing as well. But we will keep an eye on Eve as well going throughout 2026. Let's go across to Germany now, and West Side Extreme Wrestling, of course. Go into a lot more depth from this on the After Presser podcast, but let's keep it light here. WXW, of course, based out of Gelsenkirchen, Oberhausen, Nordrhein-Westphalia, celebrated their 25th anniversary this past year, and by all intents and purposes, still going way strong, like their 25th anniversary tour in the second half last year, doing good numbers, a lot more shows than they typically do. Of course, the 16 Karat Gold Tournament is their tentpole event, won last year by one called Manders, who would then go on to win the vacated Unified World Wrestling title. And again, 16 Karat Gold always has a really solid lineup. I mean, in terms of fly-ins for last year's Karat, you had Psycho Clown, obviously Manders. You had Daisuke Sakamoto, Masaki Mochizuki, Adam Priest. So it's not just a tomb just of locals and Europeans. They actually do a good job of having names in from further field, and the lineup they've got this next year. You are looking at a similar array of talent. You've got the likes of Chihiro Hashimoto in the lineup. You've got Tetsuya Naito and Bushi for all pros and cons there. That's a separate argument there. We've got Naito, Bushi, Minoru Suzuki, not return but across the weekend. Eric Stevens, Thomas Shire, So yeah, you've got a lot of names who, and this is Wexley's forte with these crowd weekends. You've got the homegrown stars, and you've got the names from further afield to grab you. And had this, the World Tag Team Festival Pro Wrestling Grand Prix last year, where you had Dragon Kid and Dragon Dyer coming in. That drew some fresh eyeballs from fans who wouldn't ordinarily have been watching WXW, but that's how this stuff works. But yeah, so Carrot was I think hands down the turn of the year with a lot of good matches in there. A hidden gem if you want to go back on your Triller TV or WXW Now subscription. Axel Tischer and Lawrence Rum from that weekend went extremely under the radar because it was two local lads. But I think one of the other things in terms of like negatives, and this is obviously going to be an ongoing thing with the independents, is how WXW have lost two of their real tentpole names coming out of COVID. Igel Blanc, just popping up on NXT this week as Elio Lafleur. Mike DeVecchio, who hasn't popped up on TV yet, which makes me a little bit nervous. He's got he's going under his real name, Mike DeRuda. Cesaro as well, granted it wasn't a big WXW name, but he did do a few matches there. Leon Slater, he's supposedly slipping away as well, going by how he's being booked on TV. It ain't like WXW hasn't rebuilt from the ground up before, but it is a little bit disappointing that you've had 2, 3, 4 real big names that have had various different roles in WXW gone. I mean, in the case of Mike DeVecchio as well, we had the inches as well before, and so it wasn't really like could really do the have him really put someone over strongly. Yeah, you did have a run with him and Nick Schreier, that kind of pivoted into the tag team with Lawrence Roman as the grind, but for the most part, you weren't able to get the big, passing the torch, so to speak. Throughout 2025 to WXW, Aaliyah Bloom and Ahura were the two guys who really stood out. Yeah, Manders was the champion, but from the guys who were there all year round, those were two who continue to battle each other. And if you have current champion Peach Tahani's 1A, then Bloom and Ahura are the 1B and 1C. You can argue which order you want for those two. But yeah, definitely who you would say be Wrestler of the Year for WXW in 2025. A lot of good matches on there, against Bloom and others. There's doing the rounds on Instagram and TikTok. The against Manders, the lariat that sent who were deep into the crowd. Has gotten some eyeballs, which again, how many of those people actually tune in to see Uhura or the back catalogue, remains to be seen. But the fact that it's broken out of containment, so to speak, is always a good thing. Elsewhere, tag division's a little bit hit and miss, and I think something I've been complaining about on the After Fest podcast as well is WXW's tag division is similarly a little bit not as deep as it once was. Planet Gajira had belts for a while. Norman Harris and Alex Duke with Big Bucks had the belts too, but injury kind of derailed that. Greedy Souls had the belts for a week, so enough time for a cup of coffee and a bratwurst in Hamburg. But yeah, entering 2026 with the Grinders champions, and I think this year we kind of need to see some kind of rebuild job before, just to avoid what we had coming into the end of 2025, where it felt like a lot of the grind against Planet Gajira. As good as those matches were, a bit of variety, was kind of starting to, some people are starting to cry out for, but we'll see how we'll go. Elsewhere in Germany, we touch on the German Wrestling Federation in Berlin. Their promotion, they run pretty much monthly. Their Berlin shows are free on YouTube, so what's better than free, right? But again, the constant issues that people who look into these kind of things have constant issues with GWF tends to be the lack of clear show-to-show booking. Like, we'll have some things where it's like we'll build up for a couple of shows down the line, but for most time, particularly the undercard, it's stuff that seems to be announced on the day. There's no really like big feuds or big rivalries that carry on, which again, if it's wrestling you want to sit down and watch and not think too much about it, fair enough. But if you want to sink your teeth into it, GWF, that is the one thing that you can maybe point a finger at as, hey, this is the one part that that maybe could do better at. And no, I'm not talking about the ongoing Blutsbruder prospects, and that just seems to have gone absolutely nowhere in the past year or so, especially since the tragic loss of Bad Bones in 2024, I think it was. But the big thing coming out of 2025 was the crowning, I guess, of Rambo as champion now. in WXW, he's been a bit of a meme as the tag partner of Metahan, getting more of a reaction from Metahan for sure. In GWF, he's finally gotten his roses, so to speak, end of the year as champion. Successful defense against Peter Tahani at the end of the year means that he's, I would say without equal, but certainly he's one rose where this feels like it's a title run which isn't going to be here for a long time, but it's going to be here for a good time, and certainly one worth keeping an eye on. Going back to the UK, we've got ICW in Scotland. Not going to be speaking too much on this lot. They've gone a bit of a reset this year. They moved out of the Asylum in Glasgow and they're now going back to the Garage for most of their shows. I think it's a good move in one sense because the Asylum, I think, only held like 80 people and looked, certainly from some angles, some of the live streams looked very small time. Problem is the Garage is a bit bigger and you're getting the inverse problem where, if they're not full, it screams that it's not doing well. Starting New Year, Rio as champion, she beat Kenny Williams and successfully defended against him at Fear and Loathing the end of last year, so she is the big one on top in ICW. We have had returns for some old faces there. Mark Coffey, Joe Coffey, Wolfgang, formerly Gallus. They're back in ICW, but although Wolfgang now is the ZOG champion, not exactly like being shoved down your throats as you would have maybe feared when, the three big guys of old who've come good are back on the scene. So that's one good thing for having to fallen for that trap of, he's some guys who are big in WWE, let's make them the stars of our show. Women's division keeps ticking along as well. Angel Hayes currently on top, having won the title in a ladder match at the end of last year. But yeah, I think ICW, we've got a lot of names on which maybe you won't see elsewhere. And again, that's a very typical geographical thing of England and the UK, so to speak. Names in Scotland don't tend to travel too far down south, for better or for worse. But certainly seeing it's well worth keeping an eye on, especially with young names coming through. Especially ICW don't tend to do that much in the way of, certainly not getting the big crowds of old as we had at the Hydro all those years ago, but certainly something worth keeping tabs on, if only for the new generation coming through. Speaking of another promotion that hasn't hit the heights that they once did, OTT in Ireland again, this one barely going to scuff on because nothing they seem to do seems to break containment, so to speak. Like, unless you're following the OTT YouTube, they're not getting, or OTT Twitter even, you're not getting anything in terms of, like, you're not seeing much buzz and people going for shows, and like the pictures that you see, there are people going, but it just, whatever they're doing just isn't as viral as it once wasn't. Again, that's a lot to do with chasing away a lot of the fans they had that were screaming from the rooftops, June speaking out and throughout the pandemic. Big Damo was being champion there throughout the whole of 2025, and I think part of your problem as well with OTT, and you were seeing this before the pandemic as well, so it's not just a brand new thing, is they are struggling to find and retain a major venue or regular venue in Dublin. So part of the make up for that is they are travelling throughout Ireland, but it means you're getting a lot of different crowds a lot of the time, and I don't think we're in any danger of OTT getting back to the heights they once were, at least not, I'd be stunned if it's in 2026 just because of, one, you're not getting like a Tivoli where if you had people travelling there every month, sometimes from abroad for their shows. Again, certain names there, but right now there seems to be something which is a scene that's very much contained in and of itself. And granted, you have had some OTT guys do Progress Dark matches, some Irish guys over in Germany as well, but certainly it's very much ticking along, so to speak, rather than about to get on fire. Over in Denmark, Body Slam Pro Wrestling, again, their big issue seems to be just actually getting footage out there. Like, it's on their website early today, they have been on demand, but it's through IWTV, and the last show they had up there was from February of 2025. So unfortunately, it's one of these where you're keeping up with cage match results and whatever clips go out there. Like, to be fair, they did have a quick turnaround with the show they had with Mercedes Money in was it October, when she beat Alice Inc. to add to her ever-growing at the time collection of belts. But it's one of these promotions where it's very hard to keep on top of and very hard to even generate buzz when the show turnaround is just basic glacial at this point. Like, if your last fully released show on your platform you're touting as official is a year old, you may as well, and you pretty much are just playing in front of your home crowd, which isn't a bad thing, but in terms of getting buzz and getting eyeballs from outside, it ain't great when the footage simply ain't there for people to comment on. North Wrestling back in the UK, based in and around Newcastle, boo. They've been kind of a darling of the northern scene lately, and they run out of the Anarchy Brew in Newcastle, and where if the shows aren't sold out, they're getting pretty close to it. Earlier in 2025, they did tease going live on Triller. They had things 1 or 2 shows, but then that was abandoned. Again, it's one of those things where you're incurring extra cost, and if you're not getting that back at the gate or through your partners, it's why spend the money when the method they've been working with now is putting shows on Triller and on their Patreon. That seems to work. The big thing this year was Leon Slater being unseated as champion. Gene Money won at July's Thunderstruck 3. That's their big annual show at the Walker Dome in one of the suburbs of Newcastle. You can guess where by the name of it. Second half year hasn't quite been as tumultuous. Gene Money's been defending against Rampage Brown, Miles Kane and Zio Knox. Not headline-grabbing names, sure, but Norfolk going strong and steady. We had a bit on Dragon's Den over in the UK, the British version of Shark Tank for you folks in America. And yes, certainly Norfolk promotion you should be absolutely keeping an eye on going into 2026. If only because Triller TV Plus, as long as that's around, you're still getting stuff there. And the turn-on's not too bad either. It's certainly nowhere near the levels of Body Slam. Attack Pro Wrestling, they were most doing out of Cardiff and Bristol. They came back sort of a year or 2 ago, but I would say they're not quite at the levels that they were pre-pandemic. Certainly the wackiness has been largely dialed down, apart from the Legion of Bloom for Wrestling Sunflowers. Some people on the site would have heard that description and have gone, well, fuck this, and tuned out. What I'd say is, Attack is pretty much almost, I would say, like a feel-good promotion. I say you're not getting the anti-fun police, although that's probably for the best these days. But it's more of a promotion where you've got your storylines. It's all about not taking itself too seriously. You've got Wrestling Sunflowers, what do you expect? But to me, it does feel like Attack does kind of sit in a weird spot. Like another promotion I'm going to touch on in a moment, Riot Cabaret seems to have stolen their thunder as the wacky, here's all the gimmicks, here's all the, the bells and whistles promotion, whereas Attack, very much DIY. There's a lot of local lads, a lot of names and faces you'd expect. They've done the ICW thing where they've largely avoided having the, hey, we've got friends in high place XWE guys, and they're all over our shows. You're not getting that. You are largely getting guys from the Welsh scene with the likes of additions from likes of Kanji, who entered the year as champion. Jay Joshua, again, another name that made his name on Attack and before moving elsewhere. But you look up and down the cards. I mean, they just had a 4-day mistletoe at the end of the year. In fact, they were able to do 4 days back to back to back to back. It tells you there is a lot of interest in that scene. Maybe some of the names might not be swinging the boat. We've got the Bryan brothers. Over 3 of them, somewhat regular in Attack. Again, former Attack champion. Tommy Vril, a name that's starting to come up. Again, making his base in Attack and starting to appear. Had a couple of matches in Rev Pro, beg your pardon, and he's starting to spread elsewhere into the certain south of England. Former Elijah, now gone by Matt Gatlin. A name that's very much part of the furniture in Attack. So a lot of names, and which you'll be familiar with. Danny Luna when she's not taping for TNA. So a lot of names which you'll see. So it's not just his load of trainees with the odd big name. In Attack, most of their shows are streamed live for free on YouTube as well. It's always a bonus. So that's definitely one. If the glut of masked gimmicks of old puts you off, definitely Attack's one worth putting on the back burner at the very least this year. And close out with Riot Cabaret. I guess the grown-up Attack, so to speak. They run in the Clapham Grand in South London. And let's say this is pretty much what Attack was, but with a lot more polish and glitz. For me, I would say it's very much not my Graps hashtag, just because it's a promotion that really doesn't take itself seriously, but also their VOD is, I'm not saying it's non-existent. They do have one. It's on their own Patreon, I believe. But outside of show days, it's one of those promotions you don't hear that much of. You'll get like a lot of buzz like they had, 90s British TV star Mr. Blobby. They keep digging up, putting on shows. They've had storylines, Gene Money doing the Who Done It after Tate Mayfair's was shot, and so there's a lot of ridiculous, silly stuff, and it's not like ridiculous to the point where you turn off and go, I can't be bothered, this is too stupid. But at the same point, it's also the kind of thing where, like with a lot of British wrestling, the booking has kind of stuttered throughout the year. I mean, the show they had the end of December, you had a lot of title changes. So, Riot Cabaret had they spent things over a year with Nico Angelo, beg your pardon, being built up to become champion. Finally won the belt at the Forbidden Door show, Someone's Knocking on the Door, in August. Finally won the belt from Mark Andrews. And the first real big show at the end of the year, lost the belt to Spike Trevay in an ODQ match, who then lost to Charles Crowley, who was brought back to the company because of the Christmas wish gimmick, which, it just to me just feels like one of these where when you spend a year building someone up to be champion and then they lose, second show afterwards. You kind of had this with Rev Pro and Luke Jacobs. It kind of deflates, and certainly for a certain group of fans, it also makes you lose faith in them actually being able to build anybody up, because if you've invested a year in the rise of Nico Angelo and then boom, he's gone, it kind of makes you feel stupid for investing in all that. Not that it's going to have any impact in Nico Angelo. I don't think he's lost any fans in this, but it is going to make it very hard for promotions like Riot Cabaret having anybody invest in anything long term, because the last time you did it, this is the reward we got. So it's one of those where Riot Cabaret, it very much not my kind of wrestling, but certainly one worth at least keep an eye on results and see just what they're getting up to. There's the Slam Ball tag team division they do, where you win by hitting the most body slams in a match. Again, it's ridiculous, but it works with Riot Cabaret. And if we did that in Rev Pro, I think one Andy Quillen would have you cast up by even suggesting that. Try that if you're involved with him. But it's one of those where it's certainly a promotion that has its limits, and things very comfortable working within those. We're getting good crowds. They're not doing the thing of running too often to dilute themselves down. It is what it is, and they're very happy with it. So anyway, that'll do for my round of 2025 in around most of European wrestling. Part of my resolution this year is just try and keep tabs on a lot more promotions, especially those which making their footage accessible. As a True Grit out of Yorkshire, they've just started a weekly televised show. Basically doing the old thing of recording one show and splitting up into a few episodes, but well worth giving a look there. I think that's on Triller TV Plus as well, so I think we've got a couple of episodes in, so again, worth digging in. Especially since Cage Match doesn't tend to be that hot on updating True Grit stuff. Again, it's one of the small promotions, but again, well worth a shot. But yeah, 2026, we're in a new year. A lot of big shows on the agenda already. We do have, Rev Pro Wembley, which we'll be speaking about ad nauseum. We'll be fed with me talking about this by the time we get to the summer. Wrestle Queendom for Indigo VO2. 16 Karat Gold in Oberhausen in March. A lot of big stuff on the horizon. It's time for these promotions to deliver, but it is time for me to sign off. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll be back. Imagine in a few weeks, see how Rev Pro steer this road to Wembley, and see what else comes out of the European scene as well. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you shortly.
Hello, Voices of Wrestling listener. Dave Ryan here. Have you ever wondered to yourself, how many hidden gems are hidden away inside the last years of World Championship Wrestling? Have you ever asked yourself how many tenuous gags can be made about the name Mike Enos? And have you ever thought about what it sounds like for two Irishmen to interpret a very chaotic company through its B show? The answers to all this and more are just a click away. Check out Days of Thunder every second Thursday on the Voices of Wrestling podcast network.
Hello, Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network listeners. I am Jeff Hawkins, co-host of Shake Them Ropes, with a very special announcement. If it's been a while or you've never listened to us before, the original gang is back. Myself and Rob McCarran back talking wrestling. We have no idea where this show's going to go, where we're going to keep any of the old bits or any of the old things in there. It's going to be a process. It's going to be a journey, and we'd like for you to come along with us. Only on Shake Them Ropes on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network.